On September 16th, 2025, I beat a Persona game for the first time. 130 hours and one mildly fatal story later, I decided to try and turn that time into something worthwhile for you all, and sort through my thoughts here, while hopefully coming to a conclusion as to what they are with all that preamble out of the way, musing on Persona 3 Reloaded, Memento Mori. Having gotten this game on sale at one point, I don't rightly recall when I did. For one reason or another, I decided to give it a shot, not fully realizing the commitment I had made. With this being my first foray into anything close to this genre, I had no clue what to expect. I knew it was a JRPG, so there was a certain amount of Japanese-ness to it to be expected, mixed with a not-so-subtle amount of RPGing, which, when you boil it down, is more or less what it ended up being. Dungeons, stats, party composition, and even a little role-playing where you can tell small children that, yes, it is in fact their fault that their parents are getting a divorce, and they should feel bad about it. You'll cry about it while you go burn yourself in takoyaki or something. Getting into the actual gameplay and substance of the story, the gameplay is more or less split into two types. A life sim where you go about being a mildly emotionally vacant young man who seems to have an irrational fear of barbershops, and being the stoic commander of an anti-demon after-school club, with a ragtag of friends which you will grow closer with over the next year to boot. And while it's not the most riveting bit of dungeon and tower crawling, whatever you want to call it, it is something that I found myself not exactly minding in most situations, as I could put on some overly long video essay about very important matters, such as the horses in A Song of Ice and Fire. The Stranger is probably my favorite. The only exception to this being fairly decent, if somewhat boring experience, is when you were a bit overconfident and had progress wiped for the entire climb you went through, losing an entire afternoon because you decided it would be a damn good idea to try and climb from floor 1 all the way up to the top. Don't ask me how I know that feeling. So all in all, the controls and combat isn't horrible, it's just a bit vacant of any further depth once you get a decent hang on it, though it could also be that I was playing the game on normal difficulty and it generally would spike up in terms of actual engagement when you get to the higher difficulties, but for my first run I decided to go with normal and go from there. On the other hand, while we might be slaughtering our way through hordes of shadow creatures, we still have to pass our classes and do well in school, along with making friends and connections. So let's briefly touch on that. Again, I have a feeling this will be a sentiment shared across the entire game. The system is functional enough, giving you a series of lectures in class to either listen to or doze off in. Doing so will work up 2 of your 3 stats depending on what you choose. These 3 stats being courage, calm, and academics, which then can give you access to more social links, which can boost your persona's abilities. Through all this, you get to pick a variety of dialogue options ranging from being supportive of your friends and helping them through issues to, as I mentioned before, telling a child it is their fault that their parents are getting divorced and they should run away, and from there, your bonds will grow and change for good or for bad, depending on the options before, and also the ability to unlock these is based off of the 3 stats mentioned before. Your Persona 3. All the characters we interact with, at least the ones I did during my run, have their own unique personalities, ranging from a normal teenage dude to incompetently rich to being French. All having their own stories to tell within little 5-minute vignettes touching on some part of their personal lives wrapped up in a nice little box and bow before we move on to the next segment of the day. And in a few days' time, the next part of their story will be open for us to explore. Again, all in all, it's a well put together system, with some of my favorite stories being that of the Tower, exploring a drunken monk, and the sun, purely for its rather mirrored existence, considering what our character would go through. Moving on to controls, these are straightforward. Once you get control of them, as all controls should, it flows fairly smoothly. The only fight I occasionally had was against the cameras while running around the tower. The way combat flows, even with the gimmick bosses, the lovers being a particularly annoying one, was fairly straightforward and easy to work with within the confines, again, once you figure out the flow and gimmick you need to work with. Now, let's get on to a little more existential topics. Something the game touches on a fair amount, and as the video title would suggest, is death. Right off the bat, as you open the game, you're informed you've got a year left on the clock. Make it count. Something that I, and I assume most people who play the game, will forget about in the 100-odd hours you'll sink into the story. Along a similar vein, we get to forge bonds with a whole myriad of people, most going through their own reconciliation about the loss of something. Be it a parent who died long ago, a sister as well, themselves at some point, or maybe, in the most heart-wrenching story of all, profits due to the negligence of an employee at their company. As stated in the title, Memento Mori. Remember that you must die. Death, until the advent of the tax collector, is the one commonality held by all things. Our time here is finite, and what we do with it is a mystery that everyone grapples with at least once in their lives. And in these small moments, as we struggle along this path, we hope to find, if not joy, then comfort and contentment with where we stand with each other, learning to work alongside one another and improve ourselves, growing wiser, stronger, and maybe, if we're lucky, kinder. There's only so much that we can interact with those around us, and as such we have to pick and choose which bonds to forge and which friendships to strengthen. To find a balance in all things, school, work, fighting demons, and writing scripts about overly long games that you picked up on a whim. There's a season for all things, and all that. Strangely enough, the feeling I got towards the end of the game is most similar to that I felt at the ending of another Japanese style and themed game back in 2024, Ghostwire Tokyo. A rather wonderful story that by itself would be absolutely brilliant, stretched over what I would say is far too much time. This might be because I ended up shotgunning the entire game in about half a month on a whim. It certainly felt like the game, at least for the style that I tend to play, a bit of the fat could have been trimmed. But I have a very strong feeling that that fat is exactly why people love this game so much. And I certainly see why that is something to be loved. The thoughts on mortality and the bonds we share, leaving us clinging to life as we fulfill a final promise before we part ways and let the flow of nature continue. Laying on that rooftop after we say our farewells one last time to all those we touched in life, gaining some semblance of resolution. As we passed on, just as we were told, we lived our life as our time allotted. And after all, our life has shown some truth. The light that burns twice as bright burns half as long. And by all that is true in this world and the next, we burned brightest of all, giving ourselves to save the world from certain obliteration. So past all my ramblings, this game is truly wonderful. And for now, it was a brilliant first and last foray into the Persona and JRPG genre as a whole. As brilliant a story as it was, as enjoyable as some of the fights and art direction is, as magnificent the music and character arcs that we got to see, I don't think I'm in a place right now to fully enjoy this variety of storytelling, at least in this medium. As I write this script, I see that there's the ability to download the manga for free, which I definitely feel is a bit more suited to something I would enjoy. It definitely feels more similar to a story that I would be more interested in reading in a book or even show form. And I am fully aware that there is both manga and animated movies for 3, 4, I'm not sure about 5, but I'll definitely be looking into those because the story is absolutely wonderful. But like I said, I just don't think it's in a genre that I would be willing to fully meet on its terms at this moment. And between all that, I have definitely felt that it is not for me, which I think is wonderful, because that means that this game is for someone. I think that audience has very soundly embedded itself. So, if I were to give this game a number, look upon my annotated scale, and find a place to put it, I would most likely give it a solid 7. It is very well put together, but it's not for me. So, as I leave you here today, I do want you to let me know your thoughts on the matter. How did you feel about the ending of this game once it had said its piece? And again, as this is a story I do want to enjoy, what could it have said better to make me love the game as it deserves to be? So, leaving you here today, once more, I'm Sven, and this is Elven Prince, signing out.